Hey, what's up? It's Dan Riccio and Randip Janda. This week's topic, goalies. And Thatcher Demko, Randip, he is the star of everyone's eye. Bruce Boudreau can't stop talking about how much his goalie has meant to this team. Is Thatcher Demko a Vezina candidate?
He's an all-star, and yes, in my opinion, he is a Vezina candidate. Listen, the list is really a pretty long one in the NHL right now. We're seeing a lot of standout seasons from goalies. Go through the list. We know them all, but Thatcher Demko, the reason that he deserves to be in consideration is this Vancouver Canucks team through 25 games was terrible. But, beyond that, if you look at his play throughout the season, it's been the foundation of their game. It's been a huge part of the turnaround with Bruce Boudreau. And I know if you look at his individual statistics, maybe they're not, up there in terms of save percentage, and the goals against are not necessarily top 2 or 3 in the league. But look at the 5-on-5 save percentage of the Vancouver Canucks, number 1 in the league. What does that tell you? If you give Thatcher Demko a chance 5-on-5, he's probably going to stop the puck. He is he's played the majority of the games for the Canucks. Yaroslav Halak's only got a few games in. So that tells me that if it weren't for the Canucks penalty kill, which has been struggling this year, and you give this player a chance, Thatcher Demko has been the foundation of this team. That's why they've been able to claw themselves back into a chance of making the playoffs. It might be a small one, but the reason is Thatcher Demko. He has been the most consistent player for the squad. And I look at some of his numbers, and you look at what he does in the net. When the Canucks give him goal support, 3 goals or more, they are 14-0-1 when Demko is their goalie. That tells you how important he is to this team. And across the league, he has shown his value as well. He was the best goalie in the month of December, and by a large margin. So he's definitely in consideration.
I know we know how good Thatcher Demko is, but I wonder if the rest of the league and, the Vezina Trophy is voted on by general managers. I wonder, if they understand that Demko is this goalie that's not just taken a breakout, but he's become one of the best in the league and deserves to be in this conversation. And I don't want to call out Eastern bias, but I'm going to call out Eastern bias, Randip. And I have really become quickly in tune with how it can play a factor in these things. But the Canucks just come off this Eastern road trip where they go through, as you call it, the Southern hospitality road trip, playing Tampa, Florida, Carolina. Yeah. All 3 of them are juggernauts, and the Canucks lost all 3 of those games. And certainly in Florida, Thatcher Demko was the second best goalie on the ice. In Tampa, he was the second best goalie on the ice. Not to say that he was bad, but he was behind his counterpart in those games. He found himself as the trip went along, dominated in Washington, and of course in Nashville. Canucks won those games. But my point here is, I feel like those first few games against the league's best are going to be unfairly weighted in the minds of some voters that only get so many looks at Thatcher Demko. You don't have Vezina Trophy winners or finalists generally that are from teams that don't make the playoffs. The Canucks still have a long road to hoe to get there. And I think about Roberto Luongo never having a Vezina Trophy in his career, and his best seasons came early on in Florida and then through the prime of his career in Vancouver. Like, there are some seasons you look at his numbers and you're like, how did he not win the Vezina? So the problem for Demko is he has to be far and away, undoubtedly, that much better than everybody else to get into that conversation, to be a finalist, to be a winner. And I think the goalie crop this year is just so good that I'm not comfortable saying Demko has been far and away, a top 3 goaltender in this crop this year.
Well, that's where we disagree, because I think he is in consideration. Your point about Eastern bias is a valid one, right? Even Jim Rutherford and Bruce Boudreau, when they got to town, said, wow, we didn't realize this is, how good this goalie is. So even the current GM and coach and the president of hockey operations of the Canucks did not realize Thatcher Demko and the level that he could play at. Now, the issue here is
said that Demko is the best goalie he's ever had. So.
Ever had, and that's saying something, right? He's
been here for a month.
He's had some good ones, but my point there is, okay, the Florida stretch, it was a challenging one for him. And listen, it is for most goalies. Even Andrei Vasilevsky, the great Andrei Vasilevsky, who could go down as an all-time great in this league. That's what he's trending towards. He got smoked by Detroit for 6 goals this year. So that doesn't necessarily, I'm not looking at a sample size that's small as Florida. A lot of teams are going to get mauled by Florida this year. And, is it unfortunate if GMs look at that? Absolutely. But that, in my opinion, is not a fair way of looking at it. You have to look at the larger sample size. And if you look at the larger sample size, Thatcher Demko has been in that conversation. You can have a Vasilevsky, a Shesterkin, a Tristan Jarry, a Jack Campbell until his most recent struggles with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think a UC Saros, they're a part of that conversation, but Thatcher Demko's there as well because his team is extremely volatile, as we've seen at the start of the year. And despite all of that, he is still trending towards an unbelievable season, a season that, we've seen him dominate games. We've seen him steal games. And remember, the Canucks have lost a number of 1-goal games that he played well in. So he doesn't even get credit for stealing those games because there's no reason that the Vancouver Canucks should have been in those games. Is it going to be a massive challenge for him to get into the Vezina conversation at the end of the year? For sure it is. The playoff point you make is a good one. Eastern bias, that could definitely be a point here as well. But the question is, should he be in consideration? And as of right now, and trending forward, because this is a very locked-in individual who believes in himself, I think he's going to be in consideration as long as the play in front of him is decent or, he's given a chance. And we've seen on the penalty kill, the Canucks have one of the worst penalty kills we've ever seen. And that's not hyperbole. Look at the stats. If that continues, it's going to be a problem for Thatcher Demko, but 5-on-5, the guy's money right now, and it's hard to discount that.
Sometimes these conversations aren't fair, though, Randip. And I know 5-on-5, Demko has some of the best numbers in the league, but what's the old saying about a good penalty kill? Your best penalty killer is your goalie. And
Dan, you've watched that penalty kill. Come on now.
Randip, I know, we know. Does everybody else know that? That's going to be ultimately what decides this. And I'm not saying GMs don't look at the deeper analytics when they're voting on this sort of thing, but, I don't imagine they are going to, take into account some of these factors as deeply as we would while we're having this conversation, in just that they're going to look at the Canucks penalty kill. And yes, the old cliche is your goalie has to be your best penalty killer. And a lot of it is not on Demko. Most of these goals, he has absolutely zero chance of actually stopping. But it's not really a fair world all the time. And those conversations are going to be a part of why he is or isn't a finalist when it comes to the Vezina at the end of the year. And really, I think Demko, you take the Vezina trophy out of it. Is he not one of the number 1 goalie contracts in the league already? He's in the first year of his new 5-year deal. It's $25 million total, so $5 million on the average annual value. I mean, I'm looking around, Randip, and I don't think there's too many better value long-term deals on goaltenders in the National Hockey League.
Okay, let's compare. Cal Peterson's getting $5 million. He's a decent goalie. Is he that level as of right now? No, he's not. He's not Thatcher Demko. Better value there.
That extension kicks in next year, even. So
for sure,
it's not even in place right now.
Grubauer's making 5.9. You would want that one back if you're Seattle, that's for sure. Thatcher Demko is looking like more value. He's the worst goalie
in the league.
If you're Jack Campbell, you're looking at Thatcher Demko's deal and saying, all right, if we're maybe putting up similar stats, and in some ways, Jack Campbell obviously has a higher save percentage as of right now. You're looking at the Demko deal to say, all right, that is probably my floor at this point because he is providing value and the numbers have shot up. So, that is value. Other goalies are looking at that number and saying, okay, that was signed previously where it's a value deal. That guy has turned into one of the better goalies in the league. It is, I think it's tough to find. I think Tristan Jarry's contract, with what happened last year in the playoffs and how he had to bounce back, there's obviously some value there because he's, still in that 3 to 4 range. So you're saying anytime you can get a starting goalie, elevate his game to this level, there's value. But I think as far as locked in long-term is the key point here with Thatcher Demko, the Canucks have 4 more years after that. That is huge, and that provides some cap flexibility. which they don't have anywhere else. They've got the second most expensive blue line in all of hockey. They've got, some of their young players locked in. They needed to find value somewhere. And luckily for Jim Benning at the time when he was the GM, and Jim Rutherford now, it's at the goaltender position. They're not overpaying there.
It's definitely one of the things new management group in Vancouver doesn't have to worry about. So, all right, Vezina candidates then. If Thatcher Demko is in the conversation at the very least, we all agree on that. Who are the other names that are there right now up for the best goalie in the league?
I think you have to look at the top of the mountain right now, and Igor Shesterkin, what he's done with the New York Rangers. I'll be honest, I am still not a huge fan of their entire roster. I think they need some upgrades in certain spots, but Shesterkin has been the Vezina, I think, favorite as of right now. And if you look across the board, I think Andrei Vasilevsky is always going to be there. He is the key to that team, especially when Kucherov and Braden Point were injured. Him and Stamkos elevated their game. Vasilevsky's been doing that for the last couple of years. And shouts to Freddie Anderson, right? Freddie Anderson, Carolina, his numbers have been rock solid. So you can look at maybe...
I don't know. Isn't his environment too, friendly?
It is.
Given Carolina is just like an absolute juggernaut right now.
I do dock him points a little bit because of that. Because if you look at the saves for, UC Saros, who's another name we should add to this list, and I think he's probably going to be a top 3 by the time the season's over. He's faced the most shots in the NHL. He's getting a lot of action. Thatcher Demko's number 2. Freddie Anderson has 300 less saves than both of those guys. 300 plus. So to me, Freddie Anderson's in that conversation. But is he a top 3 for me at this point in time? Probably not. I'd go with Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, and UC Saros. Demko's in that mix as well for me.
Yeah, I think it's hard to disagree with the 3 names that you have there. Like Vasilevsky, he's going to be in the conversation. Everybody knows he's the number 1 goalie in the league. So he's going to have a year where he really doesn't look like that to fall out of the conversation. Connor Hellebuck is similar. He's still having a good year, but not as good a year as maybe he's had in the past couple. There's another couple of names that are really coming into it, and we'll see if this ends up being Eastern bias, but Jack Campbell deserves to be in the conversation right now. The Leafs have been soft, to quote their coach, and
marshmallowy actually.
Campbell hasn't been there to save the day in all of those occasions in recent games, but he has put together an impressive half season to this point for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think there's a dark horse and a name that is coming back into the picture in Jonathan Quick. The way the LA Kings have been playing, trending towards getting back into the playoffs as well. So those are some of the names I would be looking at. Jari is in it as well.
Yeah.
But one thing is for sure, we're seeing kind of a new crop of goaltender come into the league and really start to maybe reshape or send in the new view of who the best goalies in the league are. It's Demko, Shesterkin, Saros, guys like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of those things you do have to weigh is environment versus statistics, right? Sometimes statistics, if you're Ilya, even Ilya Sorokin's having a pretty good year in 22 games this year, alongside like a Freddie Anderson. But remember, environment matters here. And that's why I think Thatcher Demko is having a more impressive season than some of his stats show.
One interesting thing about Demko, since Boudreau took over, the Canucks, spend less time in their zone. They take less shots on. And in talking to our goalie guru on Sportsnet 650, Kevin Woodley, he's mentioned that, that's a big adjustment for goalies. When they go from having 35, 40 shots a game to having far less than that and not being as engaged because the puck isn't always in their end, it can be a bit of an adjustment. But Demko, after maybe a couple of bad games to start that road trip, is adjusting just fine now. Who do you think is in the Vezina Trophy conversation? Is Thatcher Demko a finalist? Is he the favorite as we near the midway point of the NHL season? Let us know in the comments. We respond to as many as we can. And subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.